wall.
The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. It has just announced that no American should eat romaine lettuce. There is a new E. coli outbreak.
This is a serious and urgent alert from the CDC.
For President Barack Obama suggesting our country isn't making any progress because we all got mommy issues.
The reason we don't do it is because mommy issues.
Even though peas and carrots have received a presidential pardon, I have warned them that House Democrats are likely to issue them both subpoenas.
Live from New York City, it is the day before Thanksgiving.
Guys, are you ready?
Well, we've got the turkey, we've got all the vittles.
How about you?
I'm not doing anything. Somebody else is cooking, so I'm all set.
How about you?
Maybe it's Brian Kilmeade. That's why he's off today.
How about you?
Yeah, Mom got the turkey. Dad called and said he took her to the grocery store, and she insisted on getting the turkey. You know, my mom suffered a stroke in February, so bless her heart, she still wanted to do the turkey. So we're all going to my aunt's house, and all the kids will be there, grandkids, so it'll be fun.
Now, is she using my recipe from the cookbook?
Absolutely.
Good answer.
Yes.
Amazing plug.
There is no other recipe.
That's right. Hey, listen, thank you very much for joining us. We've got a lot of news on this holiday Wednesday. But first, let's start with some news from the president's team, and that is the fact that the president's lawyers have crafted answers to a number of questions by Robert Mueller. What is the topic? Well, it's all about Russian meddling. Keep in mind, it was a couple of months ago where it sounded as if the investigators wanted to know about Russian meddling and had questions about him firing James Comey regarding obstruction of justice. None of those obstruction of justice questions were answered because none were asked in this round.
Rudy Giuliani, one of his attorneys, said that the president nonetheless has cooperated, even though he says this is beyond the scope of a legitimate inquiry. He said that there are constitutional issues that have been raised here. So he said this. He said the special counsel has been provided with more than 30 witnesses, 104 million pages of material, and now the president's written responses to questions, 1.4 million. And now the president's written responses to questions. It is time to bring this inquiry to a conclusion.
And along those lines, the general feeling from mostly everybody is that with this will bring to a conclusion. Brit Hume had something to say about that last night. Take a listen.
One would think that this would represent a final stage now, and I think that the Mueller team has been waiting to see what kind of answers it could get President Trump to answer for quite some time, and this appears to be it. Now, I suppose it's theoretically possible that they could look at these answers and say, well, wait a minute, this opens up a whole new line of inquiry, and they will insist on doing that. My hunch is that the investigation is probably very near a conclusion.
My concern about what Brit Hume just said, putting the lawyer hat on for a moment, if the president's counsel is competent counsel, they will have drafted these answers so that no new line of inquiry arises. However, what my concern is if the president did what he said he did, which is say, I told my lawyers what to put in there, and they just put it in there, that's where you get the worries of perjury trap or other trap, because the president is not a lawyer, and that's my main concern. We're going to have Alan Dershowitz on coming up in the 7 o'clock hour. I want to ask him about that.
But that's why he hired lawyers.
Exactly.
He says this to them, and then they craft it to make sure, right?
That's what you hope.
And it has never, because the president has been adamant there was no Russian collusion, I don't think they're worried about that. They're worried about, okay, he answered all these questions via, writing them out, but then they're going to subpoena him in the long run. Although, there's some question whether or not, now, if he were to do that, they would have to have top DOJ officials sign off on that, and the new acting attorney general, Mr. Whitaker, and there's no indication that that would actually happen. But when you look at what the president and his team have done, this is the first time they've actually cooperated with the special counsel. Keep in mind, they've been having a war of words for a very long time. This benefits both sides, though, because it benefits the president. He doesn't have to do an in-person, face-to-face kind of meeting. And Mr. Mueller gets on-the-record testimony about what the president knows about Russia.
Some of the possible questions are what motivated him to fire James Comey, what he knew about Paul Manafort, who was his former campaign manager, reaching out to Moscow.
And to Steve, your point, what it benefits the nation, because it means this could be rounding third base and coming home, which is kind of what we need. This is a distraction. We got to move on. There's a lot bigger issues we got to worry about.
All right. Like the caravan?
Yep, let's like the caravan.
All right. The Secretary of Homeland Security, Kirstjen Nielsen, was in the San Diego area. She was on the U.S. side of the border that has been reinforced over the last week or two. And there you can see, it's interesting, while the press was waiting for her, according to the San Diego newspaper, a man swam from Mexico to the United States. He was detained and then processed. It was unclear if he was a member of the caravan. But she wanted people to understand who's in this caravan. It's not, despite the narrative that some have pushed, women and children seeking refuge from violence in their country. It's mostly young men. And over 500 of them are considered by the federal government criminals.
Yeah, and she talked about that, how the media is overreacting about this. Watch.
The reality is that there are currently over 6,200 individuals camped out south of the U.S. border in Tijuana today as I stand here. In Mexicali, there are more than 3,000 caravan members. These two groups, combined with other caravans making their way through the Northern Triangle in Mexico, will result in approximately 8,000 to 10,000 migrants amassing along our southern border. The crisis is real, and it is just on the other side of this wall.
You know, it's interesting, too, if you look at the video, when she was walking along the beach there, we saw that same area, that same beach. It's the Borderfield State Park, which is that beachfront park and nature preserve there. And when we saw it, last week, maybe the end of last week, you saw people climbing the wall. Yep. You saw people jumping off the wall, running into the U.S. and then running back when they saw the Border Patrol agents on those bicycles and on the horses. And now it's a different video. I mean, now you see the concertina wire all over the wall, and people aren't able to do that anymore. They're staying on the Mexico side because of the barriers and the barbed wire that they've put up.
And one thing that needs to be reiterated over and over again, if you remember yesterday, I spoke with those pastors at that diner in Pennsylvania, and I asked them the question, like, doesn't this mean we're cruel as a nation for enforcing these asylum laws? And they said, no, it doesn't mean we're cruel. We're a nation of laws. We need to enforce those laws, and asylum is a very specific thing. Later on in the day, Tom Homan spoke to that very point, saying, look, you have to qualify for asylum. If not, you can't come in just because you want something better. Take a listen.
Seeking a better life doesn't qualify for asylum. This president has got this nation ready. He's got additional CBP officers down there. He's got DOD down there. What this president needs to do, which hasn't happened in the past, is if they get to the United States and enter, they need to be detained until they see a judge. Because the Central American population is running around 89 to 91% will lose their case because they don't qualify for asylum. But they have to be in custody when they lose the case so they can be removed, which sends a strong message to the rest of the world that we are a nation of laws. We'll give you a due process, but you got to live by the judge's decision.
And speaking of judges, Kirstjen Nielsen, the Department of Homeland Security Secretary yesterday, said she was deeply disappointed and troubled by that Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals judge out in San Francisco who said that he issued a temporary restraining order and said that the administration cannot live by this new dictum where essentially the president said, if you want to apply for asylum, you've got to come through an official port of entry. You can't just swim across a river or go through the desert, get caught, and then ask for it. And apparently the federal government will be appealing that to a higher court.
That's the judge in San Francisco that was appointed by President Obama, who says if you do step foot on American soil, it's catch and release. That's the law.
And of course, it is the Ninth Circuit, so forum shopping. People love to, when they have a liberal cause that they want to push forward, Ninth Circuit takes all comers.
So if the ACLU, which the ACLU sued, and how do they determine which judge is going to handle the case?
Well, I mean, with the Ninth Circuit, quite frankly, Ainsley, it doesn't matter. I mean, it is the most liberal circuit. I sadly am a member of the Ninth Circuit because I spent some time out in California. It's not one of my prouder things. You just kind of have to do it. It's a requirement of the job. But you know, the Ninth Circuit is notoriously liberal. They really, by and large, only. But
why wouldn't a judge in the middle of the country be assigned to this case?
It's not assigned. You would file the case in
that
California,
area,
so it works up the Ninth Circuit.
Got it. So they knew what they were doing.
Oh, of course.
Right. There's just some suggestion whether or not the advocacy groups that filed have standing in the case.
Great point.
And so stay tuned. We'll figure it out. Speaking of President Obama has his foundation summit in Chicago. Yesterday, he was talking about the state of the world for the most part. And when he was speaking about reducing carbon emissions by 30% with available technology as an example, he started to take a shot at how the United States has some problems, maybe some mommy issues.
The reason we don't do it is because we are still confused, blind, shrouded with hate, anger, racism, mommy issues. We are fraught with stuff. But the thing that really we have to invest in is people.
As some news outlets suggested wrongly that the comments were about the president, he was clearly speaking about talking about reducing carbon emissions, according to the reportage out of Chicago.
Yeah, there were 650 people there from 41 countries, 17 states, and 100 of them were from Chicago. And he built that facility on the south side of Chicago, where he said he really found out who he was as a person.
Of course, we want to know what you think about mommy issues. Email us, friends@foxnews.com, and we look forward to sharing that with you on this day before
Basically saying we're just not there yet.
Yeah.
His opinion.
It's 6:11 now here in New York City, and Jillian joins us on this holiday Wednesday.
Hey, Jillian.
Right, good morning. Still following this news and this potential rain out of California. Search crews are hoping forecasted rain for today will help end the campfire in Northern California. But the rain also means a big risk of flooding and mudslides. The weather shift comes as we learn 84 people are now confirmed dead statewide and 700 still missing. New video shows brave pilots risking their lives in the Woolsey fire in Malibu, using a helicopter to rescue 3 people and their dogs trapped in smoke. President Trump will not punish Saudi Arabia for the murder of Washington Post columnist Jamal Khashoggi.
I'm not going to destroy the world economy, and I'm not going to destroy the economy for our country by being foolish with Saudi Arabia.
President Trump says even though the U.S. will remain partners with the Saudis, he does not condone the murder at their consulate in Istanbul last month. Breaking overnight, Republican Representative Mia Love loses her House seat. Democrat Ben McAdams defeating the 2-term Congresswoman by just 694 votes in a Utah race that took 2 weeks to settle. Love has not yet conceded. She was the first black Republican woman elected to Congress. Democrats will now hold a majority of at least 234 seats in the House. That's a look at your headlines. I'll send it back to you.
All right, Jillian.
Thank you, Jillian.
All right. Meanwhile, straight ahead, President Trump not staying quiet about that Obama-appointed judge we were just talking about who blocked his asylum order.
This was an Obama judge, and I'll tell you what, it's not going to happen like this anymore.
Well, Dr. Sebastian Gorka says this is a true national security issue, and he joins us next.
Plus, it's the Thanksgiving prank freaking out parents everywhere. Can you microwave a 25-pound turkey? This morning, Butterball decided to weigh in.
This was an Obama judge, and I'll tell you what, it's not going to happen like this anymore.
President Trump firing back at the federal judge blocking his administration from refusing asylum to those who enter the country illegally. Our next guest warns this is a true national security problem as a wave of new migrants arrives at our southern border. Here with an explanation, Fox News national security strategist and former deputy assistant to President Trump, Dr. Sebastian Gorka. Dr. Gorka, good morning to you.
Good morning, Steve.
Well, this sounds like what happened with the travel ban all over again.
Yes.
The president came out with a travel ban, and then some judges across the country said can't do that, wound up going to the Supreme Court.
Yeah, and I was right there defending the president's travel ban. I was given the travel ban to review before it came out, and then we had to fight it all the way. And for those liberals who say, we have an individual in the White House with dictatorial propensities, it's absolutely the opposite. We went through the whole court system, through the appeal system, right up to the Supreme Court. And what was the final decision? Exactly what we said from the beginning. In the United States, one person gets to decide on who comes into the nation and whether they are a threat to national security. And it's not the legislature, it's not the courts, and it is definitely not somebody in San Francisco who belongs to the Ninth Circus Court.
You say this is a true national security issue, and given the fact
Yes.
that the Secretary of Homeland Security, Kirstjen Nielsen, yesterday in the San Diego area said, you know, this caravan with these migrants, we have identified, and she didn't specify how they identified, 500 criminals, including gang members, in the caravan coming toward the United States.
Right. Think about the fact that those are the ones that we know about, at least 500 felons. If we go through the last decade of crimes committed by illegal immigrants in America, whether it's Kate Steinle or all the victims that we know of, this is a national security threat. When you come into any country, it doesn't matter where you're going, whether you're visiting France, whether you're visiting Vanuatu, what happens? The country you are visiting gets to vet you, gets to check your details, and if you are a threat to that country, you don't get to come in. So this wave of immigrants, which is an assault on our national security, has to be treated as any other entry point.
And exit question. A lot of people don't realize, they see the pictures and they think, oh, we should help those people. But just because you need a job or just because you want to be reunited with your family, those are not grounds for asylum under the current laws.
No. No, asylum is if you are being persecuted for political reasons or for other reasons, not if you want a job. That is very, very clear, Steve.
All right. Dr. Sebastian Gorka, join us from the Washington area. Sir, thank you very much, and happy Thanksgiving tomorrow.
Happy Thanksgiving to you, Steve.
You bet. All right, 6:20 here in New York City. He's an acclaimed neurosurgeon, former presidential candidate, and our current Housing and Urban Development Secretary. So why did one city just vote to remove Dr. Ben Carson's name from a school? We're going to tell you that. And the Thanksgiving travel rush is on. Here's an inside look at Boston's Logan Airport. We are live across the country with from our affiliate in Boston is live at Logan International Airport with what to expect if you're heading out of town today. Joy?
Good morning. Early is definitely the key because everyone wants to hit those skies. We can tell you that there's been a steady line at security making their way here at Logan Airport. AAA says more than 4.7 million people are expected to fly this weekend. They actually say that today is the second busiest holiday travel period, with Sunday being number one when everyone's returning. So the good news, according to FlightAware, as of yesterday, fewer than 150 flights in the U.S. were canceled. But the bad news, there are more than 3,000 flights delayed. TSA says the rush started last Friday with a lot of college students starting break. So travelers should expect long lines at security checkpoints. Remember, no liquids. Baggage is limited. One carry-on bag like a small suitcase and one personal item like a purse or diaper bag. And just keep it simple to move faster. And also, if you're going to be driving to the airport, leave extra time for traffic. Keep in mind, if you're traveling within the United States, come 2 hours prior to your flight taking off. If it's international travel, 3 hours is the best time. We can tell you, when we got here a couple of hours ago, this is Terminal A here at Boston Logan. The entire terminal was filled. So actually, this is kind of a lull. Not a bad time if you have to get away right now. Back to you.
All right, Joy DeMandon, live at Logan. Thank you very much, Joy. Ainsley, Todd.
Okay, thanks, Steve. Well, he's an acclaimed pediatric neurosurgeon. He was honored with the 2008 Presidential Medal of Freedom. He ran for president in 2016 and is now currently our Secretary of Housing and Development. That's the resume of Dr. Ben Carson, accomplishing all that after growing up in poverty in Detroit.
So with a story like that, why would the Detroit Board of Education vote to consider renaming a high school named to honor him? Here to react, national spokesperson for Congress of Racial Equality, Niger Innis. Thank you so much for being here, Mr. Innis. Explain what's going on here, because I think to most people, he seems like an amazing role model that all parents would want their children to grow up to be like.
He is an amazing role model. He and Candy are a wonderful couple and role model for the country, not just for the African American community. And Dr. Carson is doing some amazing things at Housing and Urban Development, promoting liberation from welfare for folk that have been mired in poverty and on dependency for generations. And it is that reason, is because Dr. Carson has a different point of view, because he dares to leave the liberal orthodoxy and the progressive plantation that is set for blacks. And there's a vicious, vicious penalty if you leave that plantation and you dare to think independently like Dr. Carson does.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. The high school was named after him in 2013, before he became President Trump's HUD secretary. The Board of Education voted 6-1 last week in favor of looking into finding a new name for the school. So it looks like it's going to happen. The majority, 6-1. Ben Carson High School's website, they say the school aims to honor the contributions Dr. Carson has made not only to the global medical community, but also as a role model for Detroit students with aspirations and interests in science and medical fields. What's wrong with that? Is it just because he's a Republican and he is part of President Trump's administration and they don't agree with his politics?
That is exactly the reason. But there's another reason as well. And before I go there and I talk about the 6, I actually want to talk about that brave dissenter, that brave one person that dissented from that. I want to find that person, and in fact, Fox News should find that person and interview them, because they're a hero, because they dare, that one person dare to dissent against the liberal progressive orthodoxy that actually really wants to hide the miserable failure that progressive one-party banana republic style leadership that Detroit has had for half a century. Detroit is mired in poverty. It's mired in crime. There is some degree of an economic comeback taking place since they've declared bankruptcy and were under state control. But that economic development is not taking place in